Sometimes I'm so home. Sometimes I know I'm so home. Sometimes I'm so.
Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are looking at the suggestions passed to developers for September 2020, and this time I think we're going to start off with some ground forces because there's some pretty cool stuff. So let's get into it straight away. As usual, thank you to Comrade and also the team behind these suggestions for putting this all together for us. It is very kind of them. So the first one is from Formatos, and it's talking about a tank that you'll probably be familiar with, but in a slightly different way. So this is the T62 Mod 1972, and the differences compared to the T62 which we have in game, which is the 1961 version of the T62, is that it has increased turret armor. It has 242 millimeters of armor around it. It also has a Dishka anti-aircraft heavy machine gun on the top mounting of the loader's circular hatch. Then we have increased headspace for the loader itself because of said hatch. Then the main gun depression is actually reduced from -6 to -5, so you actually lose some gun depression there, basically because of the new gunner's sight that it has. Then it also has some OMSH tracks, which are replaced by the wider but heavier RMSH tracks. They increase about 100 millimeters in width. Then it has a revised engine deck as well, and it also is slightly heavier at 38,000 kilos. So overall, just general improvements. The gun doesn't really change, but the actual FCS changes, and also, you know, the Dishka would be really nice to have in game, plus the extra armor on the turret. A nice little suggestion. The next one is from Kanata, and Kanata is talking about the Comrade 75. Now, if you don't know what the Comrade 75 is, it's one of the interesting British vehicles that really only got to its prototype stage. I suppose you call it its experimental stage at that point. But basically, what this was it was pretty much the first tank gun with an external placement, meaning that it was placed outside of the vehicle. The project development and manufacturing of the Comrade 75 experimental tanks were carried out by the Fighting Vehicle Research, Development and Establishment, or the FVDRDE, and the work was done in 1968. One of the main development goals of this machine was to demonstrate the capabilities of armored vehicles with an external location main-barreled weapon, and also showing the features of an autoloader, which mounts on the outside as well. The main feature of the tank is its external mounted 83.4mm rifle tank gun with the autoloader. It has the two elongated barrels with shells arranged on both sides of the barrel, and it is a unitary structure externally covered with a protective casing. That's basically the big bulge that you see at the back of it. And the disadvantage of this design was that the structure and ammunition is easily damaged by small caliber shells, shell splinters, and also other damaging elements. So yeah, this machine was just a simple design with the ideas of an autoloader and an external gun to the main area put into it, and the 83.4mm gun, which you might know as the 20-pounder gun, and which is, you know, really cool. And I think personally it would be lovely to see this in game, just because it did fully work. You know, it was fully built. It is a machine which would be really cool to see. It's a one-off prototype though, so I understand why people may be a little bit against it, but it is a really cool design and would be cool as an event or a premium vehicle in my opinion. The next vehicle is from Azens, and we're talking about the Ho-Ri. And I really enjoy talking about these. After that recent rule change, when it came to the forums, it was very obvious that we were going to get more stuff like this Ho-Ri and many others, mainly because there just isn't a lot of information about these things. So therefore, we're going to have to go off, you know, what we see, the wonderful documents that are in the wonderful documents that are in circulation. So the Hori, we actually have two in game. You know, you have the prototype and the production version. The prototype model in game is only a mock-up, which was built early in the project, and the production is fake, I think is the best way to put it. But in the end of the design, the tank would have had a very powerful weapon, which would have been the 105mm cannon. It would also have had twin 20mm AA guns and also a 37mm tank gun, which you can see on the design here in the hull. The model is basically the main one, or the end production design, which was going to be built, and therefore, according to sources, at the end of the war, this tank produced, this tank was, it had like progress in its production, basically. The model itself is known as the Hori 2. Unfortunately, we don't really have any pictures of it. We have pictures of the gun that supposedly it mounted on a stationary mount, which could fire HE, AP, HE, and also APCR. There is also, you know, a bunch of different recordings of when they supposedly built this thing and tested some of its performance, but unfortunately, as usual, when it comes to a machine like this, there ain't a lot of info on it, and that is just something we have to deal with. The next vehicle is the Type 62, but not just a Type 62, we have the Type 62G. Now this comes for us from Yonsei, and Yonsei wants this in for good reason. It would bolster the wonderful Chinese tech tree. So after World War II, China stayed in a state of conflict, of course, with the Chinese Civil War, the Revolutionary War. This pitted the Chinese nationalists against the communists, or the PLA versus the ROC. The Communist Party were victorious. They established the People's Republic of China, or the PRC, and the Chinese signed an alliance treaty with the Soviets, which allowed the Soviet Union to support China economically and also military. This led to a bunch of money loans, but mainly what it went to is a bunch of arms trading. So what China did is they wanted to start domestically producing tanks. So the Soviets sent over a T-54A main battle tank. The T-54A, which is basically the same as the T-54s we have in game, but has a stabilized gun on it, and the stabilized 100mm. What the Chinese did is they took it apart and then they built their own. This eventually became the Type 59. So what we have in the game as the Type 59 is pretty much what would be very similar to the T-54A made by the Soviets. Now this happened in the mid-1950s, and, you know, it was seen as a decent success. So, even though the Type 59, which of course was the copy of the T-54A, was seen as a good vehicle and accepted into the army, it was also seen as too heavy for some of the terrain and infrastructure in China. So therefore, they designed a light tank design in the late 1950s, and the formal development process of this started in 1958. The first prototype was produced in 1960. It was known as the Type 59-16, which was just a downscaled Type 59. It had an 85mm armament, thinner armor, smaller profile, and then trials of this went ahead until December 1962, and it was eventually added into service as the Type 62 with the production name of WZ-131. It was put into production in 1963. There was about 1,400 of these vehicles produced until 1989. So that is the standard Type 62. What is the Type 62G? Well, the Type 62G is a modernization program. A lot of these tanks from China and a lot of other nations, if we're quite honest with you, it's much easier to try and modernize vehicles instead of just completely create anew. So the Type 62G was the PLA's attempt to modernize an an outdated design. So this started in the year 2000, so this was pretty recent. The Chinese developed the Type 62G upgrade to improve the armor, give it night vision, smoke launchers as well, a new welded turret with spaced and composite armor, and also a 105mm gun from the late series of Type 59s with the vertical stabilizer. So all of these upgrades, the most being the 105mm gun, allowed the tank to fire the same ammunition of late Type 59s, including their APF-SDS, the Heat, and also the Hesh rounds. This did mean that it lost its 12.7mm HMG, which was mounted on the top of the turret, and this served for around about 12 or 13 years, and it was phased out of service in 2013. So what you have here is pretty much a beefy Type 62. It's got the 105, it's got a stabilizer, it's got a little bit of extra armor on the turret, and it should be pretty fun to use, especially since, at least for me, I already enjoy the Type 62, which is about. The next vehicle is from Pieve, and it's the Fiat 3000 Mod 30, and as you can see, it's a little chunky boy. The Fiat 3000 is its first steps in history starts at the end of the First World War with the Renault FT-17. So in 1917, after the first engagements of the British and French tanks in Flanders, the Italian headquarters decided to purchase a copy of the Schneider tank from France, and the armoured vehicle was tested on rugged and mountainous terrain. It was corresponding to the future sector of operation in which the equipment would be used, and the results obtained were considered satisfactory, and the Italian army considered buying other copies. The negotiations, though, were unsuccessful, and the proposal to mount the vehicle in Italy also ended in failure. So in May of 1918, France sent 4 light tanks from Renault to Italy, the FT-17. So there were 2 G-Rod round turrets made up of various casts and forge elements, armed to a 37mm Puteaux pistol, and to the other, a Hotchkiss Mod 14 machine gun replaced a second time by an SIA. The 2 with the Berlier Omnibus riveted polygonal tower armed with a Hotchkiss Mod 14 machine gun, then replaced also with the Fiat Mod 14. So overall, what happened is they took these vehicles, they disassembled them, they took them apart, and then they pretty much just built their own. They decided that what they wanted to do was to create their own design, so that's exactly what they did, and then they tested it for years to come, and then when this machine was built, they decided to modernize it. So when the vehicle was made, the official name of it was the Fiat 3000 Mod 21. It was similar to the Renault, but it was lighter, and it was also much faster. The tank itself, it had undergone a series of tests to determine the performance, the consumptions, and the possibilities of the crew, and at the end of the tests in 1923, the evaluation committee, which was chaired by General Costa, gave a general positive report on the tank's capabilities, while also being a bit worried about the effectiveness of the armoured vehicle armed with only machine guns, because this machine had only 2 6.5mm guns, and it was proposed to mount a 37mm quick-firing gun, which would be more appropriate to that, which could be used against other enemy tanks. So then they moved and they changed designs once again. They kept, changing it over and over and over again. And what actually finally happened with the Mod 30 is that they did, improve it. They added a new engine with it. They tried to make the crew compartment a little bit easier to control and all of that stuff. But even this wonderful design eventually fell out of favor in the mid-1930s for other designs. They did make an absolute metric ton of them, though. They really enjoyed, the design overall. It was pretty much Italy's first armored tank. So, yeah, it's just one of those little vehicles which would be really nice to see somehow in-game, even if it is just as a one-off event vehicle. The next vehicle is from Captain Daisy 97, and we're talking about the AMX 10P. The AMX 10P, of course, being the amphibious vehicle from the French, and basically this was designed to replace the AMX 13 VCI to be able to be amphibious and also have a MBC attached to it, and also have the mobility which was comparable to an AMX 30 tank. The armored vehicle itself was developed in the mid-1960s by Fiat, and it was manufactured in series from 1973 by the Rouen construction workshop for the French army, and also it was exported as well. So the hull consists of welded aluminium plates. It's obviously rectangular in shape, sloping and pointed glaze on the front of it, and the wave shield of rectangular shape covers the front part of the glaze. The fighting area, or the fighting compartment, is located in the left of the glacis and has 3 episcopes. It has one adapted for night vision and also an access hatch. The engine is placed on the right under cooling grills. The fighting area is located behind and can accommodate 8 fighters. Remember, this is an IFV vehicle. It can house a crew with it. An infantry squad with it. It had 8 soldiers or various weapons and ammunition, and access is obviously via the rear of the box using a lift ramp. The traps are presented on the roof of the vehicle and allow the shooting from the passengers, so you can actually shoot while on board. The Toucan 2 turret, which this machine actually uses, it's a 2-seater turret, and it can be equipped with 2 episcopes for the captain and the gunner, or the commander and the gunner. It is adapted for night vision, and it also uses a gun which is -8 gun depression and +50 elevation, turns 360 degrees, and it's a dual-fed 20mm mod F2. So this gun is just a 20mm. It fires 700 rounds per minute. It has a maximum range against light vehicles of 1,000 meters and against aircraft 1,500 meters. And it does have on board as well a turbocharged diesel engine with 2 250-liter tanks. It is quite a little beefy machine, which is, nice to see. Let's see. This sucks. I can't get the actual picture. I'm going to have to scroll down, but that's fine. I can show you this wonderful one right here. There we go. This is probably the best picture of it. But you can see that it has the 20mm in the middle, which is slightly offset. It has the fighting compartment in the back and also has the area in the front. And, well, this would be kind of a fun little machine, a 3-man crew. Hull breakable, of course, with the 20mm, and also could have access to a 7.62 AAN F1 as well. The vehicle overall was 14 tons with access to a 260 horsepower engine, which would give it a maximum speed of 65 kilometers an hour on road, and in the water 7 kilometers an hour, and made by Hispano Suiza. So yeah, overall, an interesting vehicle. Would be nice to see at some point. The next one is from Sternjäger, and it's talking about another Swedish Centurion. This one, the last one that a lot of people would know about. So the SDRV 105 was the last and latest development of the Swedish Centurion. What Sweden wanted to do in the 90s was they wanted to upgrade their fleet of tanks. They were either looking to buy export or import tanks, I should say, or, increase the fighting capabilities of the ones they already had. So what did they already have? Well, they already had Centurions, the STRV 102s and STRV 104s, and this was going to be the final upgrade of those. So the STRV 105, what it added to the machines was it gave them a new engine, a new gearbox, new suspension system, new power system, new hatches, and also a new seat for the driver, a rotating tower floor for the Charger as well, and also had an electrically operated reconnaissance hood for the driver, and the opportunity for him to even, basically, well, it had hunter-killer functions, is probably the best way of putting it. There was also an IR sight with monitors for the gunner and the commander, and the SCRV 105, the way that you see it differently to something like the 104, which just got added into the game, is that it has an IRV camera mounted on the gun itself, so that's how you know the difference. They also added some Swedish radios into it, so therefore, it would be easier to communicate between the Swedish tankers. But only one prototype of this was built. There was only one STRV 105 ever built because the project was cancelled because it was decided to equip Swedish armoured regiments with Swedish versions of the Leopard 2A4 or the STRV 121. So unfortunately, this thing never really got anywhere. It still has stuff such as the 105mm L7, still has the same basic armour and the Blazer ERA, and also has access to APFSDS. It doesn't have access to thermals, I don't think. It just has the night vision equipment, which is similar to everything else, and also the coaxial 7.62 as well. It would be nice to see in the game, either as a premium or just bolstering the Swedish tech tree, especially after the addition of the 104. But that is the ground vehicles, which were passed to developers in September of 2020. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Trigger Hippie, Universe, Conte Baraka, Elove Goat, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Hans, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.